Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
It's Darren here, and thank you for tuning in to the Touch MBA podcast. This week, I had Tyler Cormney from MBAprepschool.com on the show. Tyler is a very successful MBA admissions consultant who graduated from Harvard Business School and has been helping applicants get into the top 7, top 10 schools for the past decade, and they have a really great success rate. So in this podcast, I talked to Tyler about his book, How to Apply for an MBA, and we really focus on the first 3 or 4 of what Tyler calls prep steps out of 10 steps to get into an MBA, which is really all about self-reflection, positioning, and career goals. So I think that this is such an important part of the process that so many applicants wait till the last minute to start working on. So I hope you really get some great tips from this episode. And one thing Tyler mentions is how important it is for you to get a team of people helping you with your application, whether that's an admissions consultant or whether that's some close friends or perhaps colleagues at work or friends that have gotten MBAs already. And I think it's a really good idea to not apply in a vacuum. And here at Touch MBA, what we try to do is help you figure out which schools fit you best. And also, if you submit your profile at touchmba.com, we'd be happy to give you some free feedback on your profile way before you apply to business school. In other words, what things you might think about in order to build up your profile before you start writing your essays and preparing your recommendations and so forth. So go check that out at touchmba.com. And I hope you enjoy this one. Hey guys, welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. This is your host, Darren, and it's my pleasure to introduce our next guest to the show. Tyler Cormney is the CEO and co-founder of MBA Prep School. And Tyler is a very well-known figure in the MBA admissions world. He's a graduate of Harvard Business School. He has a master's degree in professional writing. He's written a great book that I highly recommend called How to Apply for an MBA. And we'll be discussing some of the concepts in that book on this show. But most importantly, he's had over a 90% success rate for his clients to top-ranked business schools. We're talking about the top 7, top 10 schools in the US and around the world. So I can't wait to learn more from Tyler and talk more about how to get into these top MBA programs. So Tyler, thank you so much for your time and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Darren. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So Tyler and I are talking at the Sherman Oaks Galleria in Los Angeles.
Coming to you live.
Here we are. So Tyler, I have to say I'm a huge fan of your book, and I just think you've done a great job breaking down the MBA application process into bite-sized steps, so it's not so overwhelming. So you've broken that process down into 10 steps. What do you think, in your opinion, is the most important part of that application process for applicants?
The first couple steps. That's where you're defining and gathering the building blocks for your application. As we'll probably talk about later, these MBA applications are giving you less and less space, fewer and fewer words to express yourself. So you have to be strategic. You have to know before you begin, what strengths am I going to feature? What stories do I want to tell? Where am I going to put the highlights? Given the limited amount of space, you just got to be that much more strategic. So I think those first couple steps where you define what we might call your brand and the underlying messages, that's the most important step. That sets you up for success for the rest of the process.
Just to recap those steps, your first step is prepare to apply. So that's everything to do before your prep step process, which is, you recommend 12 weeks, correct?
Correct. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd start working with clients 2 years before they apply. We would talk about what their big picture messages are, where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, how they might mitigate some of those weaknesses. If they have a low GPA, maybe they go and take additional classes to cover their bases there. How are they doing on their GMAT? The GMAT's going to be an important step. Everything from which job experiences should be on their resume 2 years from now to are they involved in community service? Are they demonstrating leadership outside of work? Yep. Have they started to cultivate mentor relationships with their references? There's a big difference between a reference or a recommender who's really fighting for you and advocating versus just giving you an arm's length. So there's all these things you can do in the preparation phase that ultimately will make your application, your candidacy that much stronger. So that's step number one, is preparing to apply.
Such an underrated and underestimated point of the process is those 2-3 years before you start writing those essays.
I talked to an admissions officer from Harvard Business School, and that's the first thing he said. He said, a great application to Harvard Business School doesn't start 12 weeks before you apply. It starts 2, 3, 4 years. And I find that my best applicants, my best clients are people who've been thinking about this for 2-3 years. They've really been, doing their school research. They've started to think about who they're going to be in this process, what sort of stories they're going to tell. And they've been proactive in really building their candidacy.
I highly recommend that all of you read Tyler's book, How to Apply for an MBA. I'll link to it in the show notes. He has this really useful ding diagnostic part of that first chapter, I believe, where you can really go through that and see, how you can improve your candidacy in the years, before you apply. But I really want to focus on steps 2 and 3 that you brought up. So step 2 is discover your strengths. And step 3 is define your career goals. And as you mentioned, you think, this is really where more applicants need to focus. So in terms of that step 2, discovering your strengths, you talked about having these strong building blocks to your candidacy. And so one thing I'd love to talk more about is what you call points of difference, or POD. Can you explain what you mean by that and how applicants can come up with their points of difference?
The idea, points of difference, isn't a term that I invented. It's a marketing term. It's essentially what sets your product apart in ways that your target customers value. Really thinking in terms of benefits. What sort of benefits do you offer? Look, this is a competitive process. Ultimately, admissions officers are going to ask, what is this particular candidate going to bring to the program that nobody else can bring in? And so the points of the difference, and in our book we sort of try to help people brainstorm what those things might be by breaking down several different categories. Things you've started, unique talents, life experiences that you've had, whether it be travel or growing up under tough circumstances where you've had to overcome challenges and obstacles that others haven't, unique areas of expertise. Really, going through and trying to inventory how you might appear to an admissions officer. And I really feel like they're thinking in those sorts of terms. Okay, if we accept Aaron, what's he going to bring to the class that other people can't offer? Does he have a professional experience set that others don't have? Was he a very active student leader in college, i.e. he'll be a very active student leader in business school? Is he from a part of the world where we don't have a ton of applicants? Is he underrepresented in some way? Thinking through those points of difference is just going to be a key aspect of your preparation process, because then it becomes a matter of, well, how am I going to convey those, either on my resume, through my reference letters, my essays? You've got a sense, Darren, you've got a communication strategy,
right,
really, about what are some of the key things you want to make sure you share, both professionally and personally.
Exactly. In your book, you kind of sum this up in one question, which is, how could these different, interesting, and unusual things about me benefit the program and my future classmates?
Right.
So it's both a inventorying process and figuring out which of those things, and actually you recommend choosing your top 5.
I do. How do you prioritize? There's the idea that there may be things that are unique about you, but unless you can translate those into a benefit message, you haven't gone the full distance. Equally, who's the beneficiary? And I think it's ultimately your classmates. So thinking in terms of what some aspect of your background or some difference about you, how it could be translated or put together in a concrete way to deliver benefit to your classmates, right? It's the marketing mindset behind this admissions process or application process is really thinking about and putting your points of difference in benefits terms. So that's a really important question to ask yourself.
I'm sure some of our listeners are thinking, well, okay, like I've tried to do this, like I've tried to list out, what's unique about me, but I don't know which of these 5 things to pick. I think this might be able to help benefit my class that, I used to live in Singapore, or that, I tried to start my own company, but I'm not sure like which one's more important than the other. I mean, how do you help your clients kind of figure out what those 5 are, right?
Right. It's a little bit of art and a little bit of science, probably more art than science. You'll see in the book that what you start very broadly, thinking about uniques. Then you try to translate them into benefits messages, and then you consider them, in some ways, force rank them. But one of the ways I find an important point of difference emerging is how you might activate or apply that point of difference at a particular school. So, for example, if you've done nonprofit consulting and you find out a particular school has an organization with similar goals or maybe serving a similar constituency, then you've kind of put the two things together. Not only do I have nonprofit consulting experience helping underprivileged kids, encouraging them to do math and science, but your school has an existing group that serves underprivileged kids, and I'd love to bring in kind of the math and science angle and take my experiences and what I've learned there, both to help my classmates understand how to reach that group, best practices we've learned along the way, right? You've really made it very concrete in your own mind, in your admissions officer's mind, about how you're going to apply that ability at that particular school. Then it's really a top-ranked point of difference because you've got a fully formed argument, if you will, that admissions officers are going to understand and appreciate.
That's so key. So the second part of that points of difference is knowing what jobs the school is trying to accomplish too. And that's something you talk about, treating your MBA application as if you're applying for 4 different jobs. The jobs of being an MBA student, the job you'll seek after graduation, the senior management job you're targeting down the line, and the leadership job and impact you'd eventually like to have in the future. And I think that's really crucial to get in the other person's shoes, in this case, admissions officers. Right.
Well, you're a former admissions officer. And so that one about that job you want, we were just talking about this before we started, that job that you're targeting, and this really also brings us into that career goals portion of the process. That job you're targeting and your employability, how you're going to look to recruiters. That's something an admissions officer is going to have top of mind, some more so than others. You were making that point.
Yeah, I think that career goals are so important these days, with MBA admissions offices cutting down on the length of their applications, whether that's through essays or recommendations or whatever it is. So knowing what you want to do and showing a clear way and path of how you're going to accomplish that is so critical. And that's actually leads me to my next question, which is about what you call a career story and how important it is for applicants to develop this career story, that they're not just their CV. So that there's a sequence to this career story, like a book. So could you elaborate on that? Because I think so many applicants kind of get stuck on this, I did this, and I did this.
Yeah. The facts are on your resume. If you've done a good job with your resume, your achievements are there as well. But telling your story, your career story, in a way that the admissions office will, whether in an interview or in an essay or in the resume itself, how those things fit together. That first job might have been about building sort of the analytical foundation. That might be the sort of subject, if you will, or headline of that chapter of your career story. Maybe the next chapter is about interacting with clients, creative problem solving, getting a chance to lead some teams. The third job on your resume, if you have one, could be sort of pulling that all together, coming up with innovative ideas for helping your organization grow stronger, adding new clients, attacking a new line of business. How have you made a top line impact in that third job? So really thinking about those chapters, understanding for you, sort of what benefit you gained, what you learned, what challenges you overcame within each chapter, but then being able to put it together, Darren, in a cohesive story that you can tell in 90 seconds, 120 seconds in an interview is important. Your ability to do that, you're just sort of doing the heavy lifting for the admissions officer in that case. Exactly. They don't have to sort of look at your resume and extrapolate, oh, I bet, she learned this, or I bet that was a challenge. You've done that work for them. And that's where that career story step, and it's central to our process of working with clients, because it's sort of a two-way street. I'm helping them to build the framework, tell me their story. I'm learning about them in the process. They're getting comfortable framing their experiences and putting together a big picture for the admissions officer about what they've achieved professionally and what they've learned and how they've grown, and i.e. how they're ready for the next step, which is the MBA and their short-term and long-term career goals.
I love what you said about do the heavy lifting for the admissions office. And being a former admissions director, I can say, yes, please help, the schools.
That's what a good application does. Exactly. At the end of the day.
I think some of the key elements you brought up in this career story is the why, how, and what. In other words, why did you decide to pursue this job or this opportunity? What was the most significant challenge you faced, right? And how did you grow from that challenge? And putting your career, your past work experiences into those blocks should help you develop that more powerful career story. And I have to also highlight that I think a very important part of the career story is giving the admissions office confidence that you're going to land your target job post-MBA. Right. You're not just telling this great story about all these
You're connecting the dots for them.
You connect the dots for them. Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, that's where the career goals become central. I like to say that's kind of the breakthrough moment when I'm working with a client, because once I can understand and in some ways actively help them to shape that career goals, then a lot of great things come through. If we know what that next job is, we can help them to shape the resume, to highlight, amplify those experiences that are going to essentially be transferable skills to that next job. If they're an engineer, they want to work in consulting, what can we draw on in the resume to show that they've worked on teams, that they've had some kind of external client interrelationships, they've got some client, quote unquote, client management skills.
Yeah, and this doesn't have to be at work. This could be extracurricular stuff.
Sure, you can gain those skills in a range of different ways. And the other thing that really comes out of those career goals are some schools are going to be a better fit for you than others.
Perfect.
Because of their reputation in that field, because of the unique resources they offer for folks that want to work in that career field, whether it be sort of theoretical knowledge, experiential learning. A good MBA program can't be all things to all people. They tend to specialize. So once I know what your career goals are, I can better guide you towards school selection. And then the final piece, a lot of schools are going to say, why do you want this MBA? And there are boilerplate reasons that everybody gives. I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you were an admissions officer. I think when you can sort of tell the admissions officer that these are the skills and experiences I need to get to the next step. I've done the research on your school. You have this course, you have this professor, you have this experiential learning field study experience. If you've connected those things by thinking about your career goals and really developed an action plan for yourself for the MBA in general, and then pinpointed specific actions you can take at school X, boy, you've really put together a powerful combination. But it all comes back to, like I said, once you have those career goals clear, all the other things start to fall into place.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. That when you're talking about why this business school, it should reveal more you than the business school. I mean, you've done your research about the school, but if your reasons for applying to program A are the same as your reasons for applying to program B, something's wrong there, or you haven't done enough research.
You haven't done enough research, and I think on the surface, it's kind of a nuanced point, but on the surface, you think, oh, well, how are they going to learn about me from a career goals essay or a why MBA? I say, this is exactly how. Because rather than giving the same, sort of parroting the same response that everybody else gives for business school, the reasons you're going, the things you want to learn, the things you have learned and need to learn, start to personalize it. We start to learn about you through that essay in a way that we can't if you just sort of tell us that you want to network, you want to take core business classes that you haven't taken before, etc. So
and
how to use that limited space? Well, this is one of the ways.
Yeah, and I think the second part of that career story that I really love about your book is when you talk about discovering your career purpose. So it's not just your past and where you've been, it's where you want to go. And how do you develop something? I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of clients that say, oh, I don't feel very unique about like what I'm doing or want to do, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is a big challenge of a lot of applicants, like coming up with that compelling yet personal post-MBA career purpose.
Sure.
So could you please drop some advice for us on how you help applicants do that?
Yeah, I did a lot of research for the book into career planning, career goals, and that's because I think the bar has been raised for applicants. There's an expectation that you have a career vision, that this MBA is an important part of that vision. Although that job you get right out of business school is important, that's not how these business schools perceive themselves. They perceive themselves as preparing you to be a leader that changes the world, They want people that are going to shake up an industry, advance management practice, make an impact, right? That's how they perceive themselves. So therefore, their expectation is that you yourself come to them with an idea of how you're going to do that. And that's where your career purpose comes into play. And I've just found, like, if we can think about dream jobs and career purpose and career vision, we can always work backwards to what do you want to do right after your MBA? Mm-hmm. But it's the folks that only sort of think that in a career goals essay, they're asking me, what's my short term, I want to go into consulting. Those folks, I think, are missing part of the point. So how do you get to that career purpose? Well, it's tough. It's not easy. The way I chose to sort of break it down was the easiest one, I think, is within your field, within your industry, what are some of the key problems or trends or issues that are keeping CEOs and leaders in that field up at night? Okay? Is it expanding internationally? Is it delivering better service for less money? Is it technology? What are the problems and issues and opportunities in your space? Because I think positioning yourself as a future leader in that field who wants to solve or attack the most important top-of-mind problems positions you as somebody who has a sense of purpose. I work with clients all the time that are interested in social impact, nonprofit. Yeah. Those folks, in some ways, might have a little bit of an easier job with the career purpose because they might have a particular cause that they care about or a group of people that they want to serve. So that's a second way to attack the area of career purpose. Is there a certain group, or do you have an affinity with a certain group or a cause that matters to you, whether it be education or career opportunities for underprivileged sectors of society, or pollution, or you name it. Really thinking about your career in those terms. How can I make an impact, a social impact in an area where the world needs leaders? That's another sort of another angle. Look, what I tried to do in the book, and what you'll find is I tried to develop questions that even if you're not working with an admissions consultant, you just got friends that you want to have conversation. I try to create a lot of questions that I find will lead you to your personal answer versus giving somebody a cookie cutter, you must check X, Y, and Z boxes. So all of these things are about asking yourselves the right questions. I happen to have it, having done this for 10 years, through trial and error, I've learned what questions to ask. And you'll find in the book that there are some interesting ways to get at that career vision, career purpose by answering the questions that we offer in the book. But also we give you case studies of how other people attacked it. And that'll hopefully also sort of inspire some good thinking around career purpose. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. I think you ask all the right questions in your book. I just really appreciate that your book is very to the point, yet instructive, and asks the right questions. And so just to recap what Tyler just said, some things to think about when you're thinking about this career purpose are perhaps an industry or field that fascinates you, a group of people you would like to help, or a cause that matters to you. And this is just a starting point. But I think that the big overarching point of these questions is that your career purpose should be beyond you. It's about who you want to help, how you want to help them, where you want to help. Mm-hmm. It's not just about me. Mm-hmm. And that's evidence of being a leader, which is what these schools are looking for.
Yep.
Let me ask you one more question on this, because there's this dichotomy of I want to show these top schools that I can get a job. I might want to switch, function or industry, but I can get this job. Yet you also want to show them that, look, I'm thinking big here. I'm thinking real big. So how do you meld those in an essay? Or what do you think is important, to show off both those traits?
And that's a phase in the career goals process, and we call that sort of your career plan or your career path. So putting those together, now that you have your ultimate destination in mind, really charting what steps or big milestones you can see along the way. Because I work with folks from so many different fields and industries, there's no way that I can. You tell me your long-term career goal, and I'm just going to spit out okay, well, immediately post MBA, year 0, you need to be here. 5 years out, you need to be at this stage of your career. 10 years out, and then 20 years out, you're going to be at that dream job. I don't know that. I wish I did. I mean, I can play some devil's advocate with you on things like that. But what I instead advocate people doing is, once you've got a pathway, go out and start to talk to MBAs that are maybe 3 to 5 years out of school, do an informational interview. They're going to have the best perspective, especially if they've gone to business school. Yeah. A, they're going to be able to tell you what courses and classes and even maybe what school was at the top of their list and the one they went to, how they took advantage of those resources. B, they can, based on their understanding of who's coming out of business school now, what sort of jobs are going to best position you once you've told them where you want to go long term. They're going to give you a ton of great career advice about how to build your career step by step, but they're going to validate it for you. It's like having a straw man. You and I might work on getting a rough draft of your career path, but going out and validating that with somebody in the industry not only makes you conversant about your career goals and educated in a way that the typical applicant won't be. Exactly. It starts to ring true to the admissions officer as well, because it's been road tested. You've tested your plan out on people who know, and so it's an iterative process, Darren, and ultimately everybody's career plan and path is unique to them. But I think by going out and doing those informational interviews, you're going to build something that really, really, the dots connect and makes sense.
So does this sound like a lot of work? It is.
It's a lot of work.
And if you're not getting that from our conversation, I think it's a really important point. We haven't even started talking about essays or CVs or recommendations. We're just talking about getting your career goals straight, discovering your strengths, as Tyler puts it in his book. This requires a lot of self-reflection. And I believe you said in your book that you think self-reflection is the secret weapon, so to speak.
It is.
Of the MBA application.
People ask me as an admissions consultant, admissions coach, what can I do to make this applicant more competitive? It's taking them through this intensive self-discovery, career goals, how
stress
and why
testing
MBA.
Yeah,
testing it, iterating on that.
Oh.
Ultimately, they're a stronger applicant, Darren, having gone through this process. And there's still some heavy lifting to do when it comes to the practical aspects of resume and reference letters and essays. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about those things, preparing for the interview. But essentially, all those things are communication tools. So knowing what the content, the messaging is, you've got to have those things in place. You've got to have your building blocks before you start using your communication tools. You've got to have a blueprint. Otherwise, what you're building is not going to turn out the way you hoped.
Absolutely. So again, do check out Tyler's book. There's lots of great questions there that can guide you through those first 4 or 5 prep steps, as he calls them, to get that story and get that content straight. Now, Tyler, if we can now talk about trends in the MBA application space, because you've been working with applicants who are applying to the Harvards, the Whartons, the Stanfords. What trends have you seen in the last couple of years in terms of determinants of admission success? And of course, the follow-up question, what can applicants do about that moving forward?
Yeah, 2 things come to mind. The first is the trend towards more action-based learning. This has been a trend that's been developing, but I think it's really hitting its stride now. Darren, field study work, active learning. In some ways, if that is going to work in a business school environment, then admissions officers need to make sure that you can work well in a team, that you learn well in kind of a hands-on, active way, right? Each of us learns differently.
Yep, sure.
So in the old days, maybe how you did in theory-based courses sitting in a classroom would have mattered to MBA admissions officers because would be a large part of your learning. Now they're thinking, well, how's this person going to do if we put them out in the field with a client, quote unquote client, and they have to solve problems and work with a team and in a consulting-like way. I think, you look at what Wharton's doing with their team-based discussion. Yeah. I think this is a reflection of, how somebody does in a one-on interview is important, but how they're going to solve problems in an unstructured way within a group is even more important to their success in our program than it ever has been before. So that's one thing, is really, how does your application show that you can learn actively, work on a team, group problem solve, your emotional intelligence, that sort of thing. The second thing I think, and this is again just sort of a big picture trend, but almost every business school in one way or another is concerned about entrepreneurship and innovation. In years past, it might have been, is Darren going to be a great manager someday for my big corporation, for a big corporation? I think that whether you're an operator, whether you can sort of replicate and scale performance in an existing model, existing business, sure, that's going to be important till the end of time. But more so, it's what about creativity? How has this guy done something innovative? How has this gal exceeded expectations or done something different or gone against the tide? Has she started anything? Does she show that even in a small way that she can take an idea from concept all the way through execution? That kind of entrepreneurial ability, that ability to innovate, it's what companies care about these days. And so therefore business schools are looking for folks that are the future innovators, whether it be an entrepreneur. Like entrepreneurship isn't just limited to starting your own business, but what about starting businesses inside an existing, we'll call it the corporate entrepreneur, or the other snappy word for it is intrapreneur. Right. Have you shown an ability to sort of a growth orientation? I think this is an important trend in business schools. A lot of classes you're going to take on entrepreneurship and innovation, and they're looking for that quality, that trait, that ability more so than ever. So those are a couple of trends that I think applicants need to be aware of, because again, if those are on the minds of admissions officers, your application needs to convey that you're an action-based learner. Your application needs to convey that you have that sort of ability and interest and passion for innovation or entrepreneurship.
That's really interesting. So are you saying, just to be clear, are you saying that every applicant has to be an entrepreneur?
Not every applicant, right? Business schools put together a diverse community. Yeah. But again, I see it in my own work and my colleagues. There's a huge premium placed on the ability to start something new, to disrupt rather than simply perform and replicate. And I think the MBA program is back to your idea about changing the world, being a transformative leader. That ability to change things, to transform them, to grow them, that growth orientation. Look, it's not a new trend that businesses want to grow. However, I think with business schools, graduate management education has become a blend of management education plus entrepreneurship education plus how do you disrupt and transform.
Yeah. No, I think I asked that question because I don't think, for example, if you have, let's say you don't have much entrepreneurial in the truest sense of the word, like having started a business or started a nonprofit or something, that you should force that into your application. I mean, I think for me, what I'm gathering from you is showing that growth orientation, right? That could be, again, within your current job or within some other initiative you're involved in. But I think
creativity.
It's
just so valuable to a business school class, because you're going to be on teams. You're going to be working with others. So the fact that you think a little differently or have a unique background, or whether it be educational or professional, that's your differentiate. That's a key differentiator. That's a key selling point. That's a point of difference that these admissions officers will be interested in and get excited about.
That's great. So keep those two tips in mind. And then in terms of schools shortening applications and giving candidates less space to express who they are, whether that's moving from 3 essays to 1 essay or 3 essays to 0 essays, what advice here do you have for candidates who, it's a struggle to express who you are and this career story and career purpose, all within such little space?
That's right. Well, we talked about the importance of having an application strategy. Really thinking and sort of prioritizing, knowing that you can't say it all. You've got to make sure you know what things have to be top of mind, the core messaging, right? So all of that strategy work, that self-awareness work, that discovery work, it is that much more important today as it was 4 or 5 years ago, where you might be able to use the essays in some ways as your discovery process. You don't have that now. 3 or 4 years into being an admissions consultant, it dawned on me that, yes, the essays are a powerful tool to tell your story, but really the whole application, every element, each part is a part of a whole. It's a communication tool, right? Your resume is going to be an opportunity to tell your story. Your references, I take a very proactive approach philosophically in working with references.
Yeah.
Be clear and transparent with them about your application strategy. Let them know how they can help you, because they're going to write a letter or two. They're essentially writing essays for you. So I don't think put it another way, I think it's a positive if you can give them some direction. Not writing the letters for them, but giving them some ideas about your application strategy and strengths, and maybe even some examples and evidence that that they're the only ones who can write about. Well, that's a way to improve the chances that becomes part of your ultimate application. Your application form is another place, right? So you have to just be very both strategic and tactical about using the application and understanding that they all work together. That's something that I see because I've done so many of these.
Yeah.
Like, how does the resume feed together with the references and connect with the essays, and sort of so that a cohesive picture emerges? You've done the design work as the applicant, you've done the heavy lifting, and therefore for the admissions officer, your core messages, the key things that you want them to remember or know about you or tell their colleagues back in the coffee chats where they're just they remember, oh, Darren, he's former college athlete, he's built a business, he's really strong in this particular industry or field that we don't see a lot of folks at, right? You've done that work for them, so that you've used every tool at your disposal in the application. That whole application is your story, not just the essays.
Yeah, that's great. And it almost brings us back to the beginning of the conversation, which we talked about how early you have to prepare to put together a great application to these top 7, top 10 business schools. And that if the recommendations are playing such an important role these days, you better have a short list of people you want to get as your recommender a couple of years before, if possible, right? Because their story takes as much space in the application as your own now.
Sure. Well, anyone will tell you cultivating mentor relationships is just great career practice.
Yeah.
Those folks have been there, they've done that. Establishing that camaraderie and that connection to your supervisors, your superiors, is increasing. If you've got a top 10 business school on your radar, those relationships need to be there, because I can tell you your competition isn't just submitting arm's length references. They're choosing mentors that are advocating for their success, not just writing cut and dried, these are the facts reference letter. And if you don't have that, well, you're at a competitive disadvantage to those who do. Look, if you just naturally form good mentor relationships, you'll have this part taken care of, but don't forget to form those great mentor supportive relationships with your superiors and deliver for them all those other things you're going to just naturally do. This isn't just about getting into business school. These are just good career practices.
One last question that came to my mind is there a common mistake that you see a lot of applicants making, or a common misconception that they have about the application process? I mean, is there something? Well, hopefully
hopefully it's gotten through as one of the key takeaways of this talk is how much time this takes. You can't rush it. You can't do this a month before. On the surface, you've never done this before, right? So to you, it's, I can write an essay, I can fill in data form, my resume is ready to go, I'm going to use my bosses as my references. How hard could this be? Well, hopefully we've shown that there are tough questions that you need to ask and answer in order to be the most competitive applicant that you can be. So don't start this a month before. 2 years prior, start to put the school research, the GMAT, the, kind of thinking ahead to your story and your reference relationships, all those things we talked about. A year before, ideally speaking, the GMAT is done. Then you can really start to work on your application strategy 6 to 8 months before. By the time you're 3 months out, maybe you've already got rough drafts of essays, at least for the traditional or the classic types of questions that you're going to get. career goals, why MBA. You've already got outlines there. You can just concentrate on those incremental things at that point. There's another video people can find online, 10 steps to getting into a top MBA. We break it down hour by hour and sort of total it up at the end. It can be 150 to 200 hours of work outside of the GMAT to do this, start to finish, all the things I think you need to do to be an outstanding applicant who's playing this at the top of their game. And with these schools turning away 9 out of every 10 who apply, 8 out of 10 who apply get turned away, this is the only way to play this game, is to try to compete and prepare as if this is an Olympics level competition, not something you sort of limber up and sprint towards 3 or 4 weeks. So long answer to your question, but that's the biggest mistake.
Yeah.
Or put it in a more positive way, that's the biggest way you can gain an advantage over the competition.
I will link to that YouTube video that Tyler just talked about. I highly encourage you to watch that all, his 10 steps and the breakdown of the process. And Tyler's done this over a decade with hundreds of candidates going to these top schools. So take his advice, get time on your side. Start early.
Time on your side, and get other people on your side. Hiring an admissions consultant is fantastic. You'll only do this once if you do it right. Your admissions consultant has done it hundreds of times. Yeah. If you can't hire an admissions consultant, reach out to friends, mentors. Doing this completely on your own, it's just tough to see who you are from the inside looking out sometimes. So yes, utilize online tools like the ones we have at MBAprepschool.com, books, forums. There are lots of options. Reach out to mentors. Do informational interviews with students. This is an active process to do it right. So don't apply it in a vacuum, and put together a little team to help you.
There you go. Well, thanks so much, Tyler, for your time and insights. I really appreciate doing this live interview with you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, be sure, guys, to check out how to apply for an MBA at MBAprepschool.com, and there's also a lot of other consulting services you can find there, as well as a course.
We have a video course. Some people learn, more effectively through video, and so what we did is, the book is really kind of the executive summary of a much more involved, sort of step-by-step online course. We call it a virtual consultant. It's kind of the next best thing to hiring a private coach. It's built so that it can be done start to finish on your own, step by step. But we take these MBA prep steps. We created an online course. We also provide lots of tools and templates and exercises. So that's another option for really attacking this in a very structured, all-in way.
Thanks once again, Tyler, and we hope to have you back on the show some other time.
I really enjoyed it, so I hope so. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your #1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.